Hello and welcome to Craft with Sarah and day 10 of the Halloween Craft Countdown 2021. We're halfway through the countdown now and we're back to greetings cards. Here are 2 free SVGs which you can download using the link in the description of these lovely spooky Halloween greetings cards. These are cut out from layers of cardstock using a Cricut or other cutting machine and then glued together with 3D foam pads for a lovely dimensional appearance. Let's find out how to make them. Once you've uploaded the card SVGs into Design Space, they should come in looking something like this. So we've got all of the different layers that make up the card, and then we've got our base card, which is why it appears bigger at the top. So this purple sheet we're going to fold in half to make the actual base card. Now over here on the right, you've got all of the layers so you can see all the different shapes that will make the card up. When you click on the design, you should see that it's 7 inches in width and 10 inches tall. And that's the size that it should be because we're making a 5 by 7 inch card. So by the time the purple is folded in half, that'll make it 5 inches tall. If you're looking at the other Halloween design, then that's just the other way around because that's a portrait card rather than landscape. You can resize it if you want to in here, but just if you're not going to resize it, make sure that it has loaded in at 7 by 10. You may decide that you want to use an existing base card, a pre-made one that you've already got, rather than cutting one out. So if you don't want to cut this base rectangle, look over in the layers panel, look for where the purple rectangle is, and just click the eye icon on the right of it in the layers panel, and then that will hide that layer for you so you won't cut it out. So if you've got a card that you just want to stick the front bits on, you can absolutely do that. Now, one thing that this SVG file is missing is a score line so that you know where to fold the purple rectangle. So to add the score line, I'm going to click on the design and then press ungroup at the top of the layers panel to separate out all of the layers. I'm then going to drag my purple rectangle over to the side so I can see it. To add a score line, go into Shapes and then choose Score Line. Here's mine over here. And you want to make it the same width or height as the bit that you're going to score. So mine will be 7 inches because it's going to go along kind of the middle along here. And then I need to rotate it. So in the rotate box, I'm going to type 90. And now that's rotated it for me. To make sure this score line goes exactly in the middle of my card, I'm going to click on it and then press Shift on my keyboard and click the purple rectangle. And that means I've now got both of those layers selected. Go into Align and then Center. And now that score line is exactly in the middle of my base rectangle. There's just one more thing left we need to do, and that is to click Attach down the bottom of the layers panel. So I've still got my score line and that purple rectangle selected. Press Attach, and that is what tells the Cricut that we want to score on the rectangle. Now you might have noticed that when I pressed that, my score line actually disappeared. This is a little bug in Design Space at the moment. Yep, another one, but you know, we have to work through it. My score line is still there. You can see it in the layers panel there. It says score, but what it's done is when I clicked attach, it moved the score line underneath the rectangle. Now that doesn't actually matter. It would still cut and score perfectly fine if I was to leave it like that. But I know it can be a little bit daunting trying to cut something out when you can't see exactly how it's going to look. So if you'd prefer to be able to see your score line, press undo on the top. So now these aren't attached anymore. So you just need to select them a different way. So this time I'm going to click the score line first in the layers panel, press Shift on my keyboard and choose the rectangle, and now press attach. And this time, because I selected it in the layers panel rather than doing it on the canvas, it's kept my score line in position. I don't really know why it does that, and hopefully that'll be fixed in a future Design Space update. Now this is ready to cut out as is, but if you want to, you can position it all back on top of each other just so that you can check you're happy with the colours, or if you still need to resize the card, then we'll need to put it all back together before you can do that. So to make sure we put everything back exactly where it needs to go, drag a box around all of the card front layers to select them all, and then at the top of the layers panel, press Group. we can then drag this over to roughly check that we're happy with the colours. But if you want to resize it now, then this isn't quite right because we can't guarantee we've lined it up perfectly against that base card. To line it up perfectly, hit select all and then go align left to make all of those front layers of the card line up down the left of this purple, and then align bottom. And now we know that those front layers are perfectly lined up along the base card, and you can check to make sure it's all aligned because your width should still be 7 inches and your height will be 10 when you've got everything selected. So I'm just going to select everything one more time, press group, and now I could resize this and it's going to do everything in proportion, so all of your layers will still line up. I actually do want to cut mine at 7 inches wide, so let's put it back to that, and now this is ready to cut out. So here are my cards cut out, and I've just layered everything on top of each other in position just to check I'm happy with the colours and to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. So I'm going to start with this one, so let's move that one over to the side, and this one is kind of easier to put together because you've just got these kind of big pieces that sit one on top of the other. I'm using off-brand cutting mats at the moment, and that's why my cards are kind of sticking together because the stickiness is coming off the mat. So I'm definitely going to be switching back to Cricut brand mats where that doesn't happen. And this is everything that makes up the card, so we can start sticking it together. To stick, I'm going to use a combination of 3D foam pads, so I like this Dot and Dab brand, and glue. And the glue I'm using is Kalau glue, which I really like because it doesn't bend or warp cardstock like some other glues can do. And then I put it into these little needle tip bottles that I get on Amazon, and this is amazing for card making because these tiny little nozzles let you get the glue neatly into all of the little holes and spaces. Now when you're doing this, it's really up to you how many layers of foam you use and how many that you glue. If you want to make a card that is really cheap to post, then you could just glue all of the layers and then it'll be really, really thin, so it'll post quite cheaply. Or if you're definitely in the UK, then you can get away with 1 or 2 layers done with foam pads to give you that extra depth. If you add them all with foam, then you'll probably be looking at a large letter stamp to post it if you're in the UK. Alright, so let's get started. I've already folded my card just down the middle, and that's the score line we made in Design Space. And I'm going to start at the bottom. So I'm going to add some foam pads to the back of this bottom layer. So let's turn it upside down. Oops, got a little bit of paper there. And then add the foam. Now I've cut my foam pads in half just so that they go a little bit further. I'm going to start by putting some around the edge. I like to make sure I've got foam in all of the corners, as those are the bits that might kind of get a bit damaged when going in and out the envelope. So you want to make sure those corners are nicely stuck down so that they're not going to catch on anything. So I'm just going to put a good amount of these around the edge. And be careful that your foam pads don't go over any of the gaps in the card, and also that they don't go over the edge, because otherwise you'll be able to see those foam pads when you stick the card together, and we don't want to be able to see them. We want them to be all nicely hidden by the rest of the card. So I'm almost done going around the edge. Just one more, I think, at the top. And now I also want to make sure I put some foam pads into the middle pieces. And that's because if you don't, then the middle of the card will sag where there's nothing kind of holding it upright in the middle. And we don't want that to happen because you'll end up with a card that doesn't look as professional. So by adding in these bits in the middle, we've got a nice firm centre. All the layers that sit on top will sit nice and flat, and it will improve your card. You can also get foam pads that are thinner than these ones. These are quite thick. So if you have the thinner ones, then you could use them, in all of the layers of card, and it would probably still go in a normal envelope with a normal postage stamp. But I don't have any of those. So now I'm going to stick this to the front of my card. Just make sure it's opening up the right way. And then I'm going to line this up. I think I'll do it this way around so I can line it up against the crease line. And to start with, I'm just going to gently let it fall and check I'm happy with how that's lining up, because if I'm not, because I've only just gently placed it down, it means I could pick it up and move it again. But I am happy with that, so let's push it down. I've got little bits of dirt everywhere. I've obviously been doing too much crafting and not enough cleaning. Okay, so here we go, that's the first layer done, and now it's time to add the next one. So to keep my postage costs down, I'm going to glue this next one, but of course it's completely up to you what you decide to do. So let's add some glue, and this is where the needle tip bottle becomes really helpful, because I can get into all of these little spaces really easily and also really quickly. So I'm just going to make sure there is lots of glue in all these little pieces. And as I said earlier, this glue is great because it doesn't bend or warp the paper when it gets wet under the glue. Now, let's turn this back the other way and line it up against the layer that is already on there. And it'll line up perfectly against the edge of the card. The nice thing about glue is that you've got that little bit of wiggle room if you do need to move it about. But that's looking pretty good, so let's move on to the next layer, and mine is this yellow one. I'm going to use foam for this one, so a little bit more depth. And I'm just going to do exactly the same as before with my foam pads around the edge and also in the middle. And I'm going to make sure those corners have some foam on them too. Now I've got all of my foam pads on, and you can see I've gone into all of the little shapes to make sure they're not going to sag. Let's stick this on. Just like before, I'm going to line it up gently and just let it fall into place so I can move it if I need to. But that's looking good, so let's push to seal. And then I just have one layer left, which is this one on top, and I'm going to glue this one because this is getting quite thick now. I don't want it to have to go to a large letter stamp. Here's my little needle bottle again. Oh, there's a little star that should have come off that. So these bottles, I got a pack of, I think it was either 10 or 12 off of Amazon for about £15, maybe a little bit less. And I got them a few months ago, and I'm only on to the second bottle so far because they can be refilled when they're empty. The only reason I'm on the second one now is that I accidentally left the lid off it one time, and the first bottle all dried out, which is very silly of me. But they're a great way to improve your card making because it means you can be really accurate with the glue, so you don't get any kind of mushing out over the sides. And this is my final layer. There we are, it all lines up. And then you get this really pretty shadow effect with all the different colours and the layers. So there we go, that is the finished card. And we've now got the other one to stick together, which is over here. And this is very similar for the first few layers. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and stick my background layers together, and then I'll come back to show how to stick the bits on the top. I've stuck my background layers together now, and for this card I've just used glue for them because I'm going to add the depth on the pictures rather than on the background. So next we've got this Happy Halloween, which will go in the middle, and this I'm going to use glue for because it's so narrow. I think it will be quite difficult to do with the foam pads. So let's turn it upside down and get our little needle tip bottle out again, and then just add a little bit of glue being careful not to go over any of the edges. And this is quite flimsy, especially if you've used lightweight card like I have. So you want to be careful not to accidentally rip it between any of the letters. So let's turn this over and then line it up where it needs to go. And then gently push it down. I'm not pushing it down really hard because I don't want any of the glue to come out of the edges. Even though it does dry clear, it still looks neater if you can make sure that none of that glue escapes. And then I'll do the same with the happy along the top so you can sort of see from the shapes on the top layer of the background where that's going to go. Let's grab my glue and add this in here. And again, this is quite narrow and flimsy in places, so just be careful when you're handling it. And then stick that down in place. There we are. And now we've just got the little pictures to go on the top. Let's put the lid on my glue so it doesn't dry out. And now I'm going to use more foam pads. That's because I want a little bit of depth on these pumpkins. And you can kind of see from the shapes where they're going to go, but if you're not 100% sure, then check out the picture of the project when you've opened it up in Design Space, and then you'll be able to see where all of these go. So just a couple of little foam pads on the back, and then they can just be pushed into position. And I love how this makes them pop out of the page. You might need to cut your foam pads smaller to make sure that they don't show up through any of the holes in the pumpkins or the eyes in the skulls, because remember, we don't want to be able to see the foam when we turn it round. So I've cut this bit really small just to go in the top of that pumpkin. And this one goes in here. And then I'll do my third pumpkin next and then move on to the skulls. One bit there. And two little bits along the edge. Okay, this pumpkin, he goes up on this top right. And now I've got my skulls. Let's turn these upside down and stick this on. So this card is really nice for using up any scraps of white or orange card to do these pumpkins and skulls. So if you've just got a little bit of card lying around, you can use that to cut with rather than using a fresh new sheet. And that's a great way to kind of get more value out of your craft supplies, because it means you can use up all those little pieces. Got this bit left. I think I need some teeny tiny pieces of foam for this. Tiny bit in the bottom. Of course you could glue this if you prefer. It would be less fiddly probably to glue it, but I wanted to have that depth. And there, that is the second card all done. So now I have my little pair of Halloween cards, and because I've used dark card, I'm going to need to make an insert to go in the middle of this card. So what I'll do is I'll probably make a rectangle in Design Space, put a score line down the middle, just like we did for these cards, and then cut that out of white paper so that I can then just stick it in and I've got something nice to write my message on. And I'll do the same for this one because that's a dark purple inside, so it would be difficult for my pen to pick it up. I hope you enjoyed this video on how to make layered greetings cards for Halloween using a Cricut machine. The free SVGs for both of these cards are available at the link below, Or to get all of the free designs released in this year's Halloween Craft Countdown, go to craftwithsarah.com/Halloween 2021. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye!